Hi, everybody. I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
Welcome to episode 34 of
Don't Die Dumb.
One of the subjects I wanted to touch on last week, I didn't get a chance to because someone, I won't say who, droned on in his usual manner, was the end of the Gathering of Nations powwow in Albuquerque. They've been doing it for 45 years. This year they drew 250,000 people and 5 million people online. It's a cultural experience. I've been to it many times that I think most people should get a chance to check out. The reason I was given by an insider was that the elders, they feel they spend almost their whole year planning it and organizing it, and they're tired. They want to retire. And the young kids don't want to take up the mantle. I guarantee you another state will pick this up. This is a moneymaker. Now, Native Americans, like most poor people, are bad with money for the most part. I don't want to make a blanket statement, but a lot of times they have a hard time making money. They're not money oriented, the ones that I know. But I'm sure another state would pick this up, and it's a shame because the largest reservation in the world is in the Four Corners area. So this was very convenient to everybody. I hope that after they reorganize, the city of Albuquerque is reorganizing the state fairgrounds, that they'll come back. But your thoughts?
It sounds like I think it's a huge economic stimulus to Albuquerque.
Yes.
So it seems like it would be in the city's interest to help them deal with these logistics if that's the issue. So they're actually winding down the powwow itself unless another state picks it up.
Yeah, it'll be done.
Is this tribes throughout the United States?
Oh yeah, this is
through
the
all
whole
tribes in the
nation.
US.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's why they got 5 million viewers, because it's expensive to come here from Canada and
Right.
from the East Coast, but all their relatives tune in
Through
to
all
check
North
it out.
America.
Yeah.
Wow.
And people will say, well, they just hear these off-key chanting and this dancing. It looks like a two-step. Try that. Try and sing like they sing in that dissonant tone. It is so unbelievably hard. It takes practice. It's not easy. The other thing is the two-step comment. Bill Miller, who's a popular Native American singer, said, I'll have my drummer drum for you. And it's dum 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 dum. That's what you think Native American music is. He goes, no, that's from the land of sky blue waters. It's a beer commercial. He said Native American is almost always dum 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 dum. It's the heartbeat because they're close to the land. I think it's a terrible loss for the city and for the state. And all I can say is I hope it comes back. I think we could all learn from that.
I'm fine with Native Americans, but we should probably start calling them Heritage Americans. They are the original Heritage Americans, aren't they?
Canadians call them Aboriginals.
Yeah.
Now, coming on to some of the subjects that we meant to cover last week but didn't have a chance, we'll wrap last week up on this. Social interaction. How important is that? Now, for both mental and physical health. I knew twins that did everything together. These guys never got married. They hung out in the same farm. They were always together. To even talk to one of them about what would you do if the other one passed away, he broke down in tears. And it's very common for couples, that their world becomes small, that when one passes away, the other does right after that. And that's a lack of social interaction, isn't it?
It sounds like there is social interaction, but it's limited to a
Yeah.
twosome, which leaves you vulnerable to that loss if the loss comes. It certainly is insurance to have a lot more people.
But if you're a gamer and spend all your time as a vidiot in the basement, or in your room, how does that affect you mentally when you go out in the world and try and converse with people and interact?
Well, we've seen a deterioration of social skills as people do more and more of their interacting online because, from behind a keyboard, you don't necessarily feel like you need to be as courteous or as polite as
Yeah.
you would be in person. And then when people meet, those skills have eroded.
Now, we also see people that are what we used to call in the old days hermits, and there's a very good movie about this called Train Dreams. If you get a chance, check it out. Have you seen that?
I've not.
Please check it out. I think it's a great movie. A lot of people, it's subjective, so a lot of people won't agree with me. But there are people we know that are hermits their entire life and are perfectly fine with that. They don't feel they need social interaction. But is the country so fragmented now? We don't have Americans, we have Italian Americans, we have Irish Americans. Are we so fragmented that we can't interact properly? Your thoughts on that?
I think we can. I think we don't. I think that's the issue. Is there's so much of what your life turns into is just being ping-ponged from things that are essentially chance interactions, and when you take those away by making everything into an algorithm, you're taking away those interactions and you're taking away a lot of that richness.
If I can control all my interactions, I can make sure I never hang around with people who disagree with me or who are different than me in some way that makes me uncomfortable. And the more of that happens, the less able I am to function in a diverse society. And we're seeing a lot of that right now. Everybody's afraid of people who aren't like themselves. By the way, it works the other way too. If you're somebody who wants to, if you would like to buy an amputated fingertip and eat it, there's actually a web community for you. And there might be 2 million people in the world who are into this bizarre community. If you're in a community of 2 million, you feel pretty normalized until you realize it's like 0.0001% of the population. The point being that I'm trying to get at is that maladaptive communities find each other online and think that they're more mainstream than they are. They think they're more normalized than they are. Now, normal by itself isn't automatically a good word to me. I'm perfectly fine being eccentric, but I want to know where I am and how eccentric I am and why I'm choosing not to swim with the crowd.
Now, you realize there's a whole society of people that really cling onto one conspiracy theory to the next. And my idea is that they do that because they want to say, I got a secret. I know.
Right.
You don't know like
Yeah.
I know. Is that normal?
It's absolutely normal to want to feel special.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, I think you're about to.
No. I think that's absolutely right.
So it's normal to want to feel special, and we all think we're the cleverest person in the world, which is another funny thing to me. Like, you know that you can't play basketball like Michael Jordan. You know that you don't want to get on a football field with a pro football player. You know that you never want to get in a boxing match with Mike Tyson. But everybody thinks they're as smart as Einstein.
Yeah.
No, we differ in our intellectual abilities as well. And moreover, if you were as strong and robust as Mike Tyson, but you didn't train like he does, you still wouldn't want to get into a ring with him. Mike Tyson had abundant natural talent, but he also trained extremely hard and intelligently. And so you could be somebody who has really good hardware, and like you're just genetically gifted, you're really smart. But if you don't go out there and train that and challenge it and test it, you will never reach your full potential, and other people will leave you in their dust. The world's highest accomplishers intellectually aren't the people with the highest IQs, but with the highest combination of IQ and drive.
Now, once a year I do this. I would ask, do you guys also do this? Once a year I call everybody on my phone, probably 89 people, and reconnect with them. And I was afraid to do that. I thought people were going, what the hell do you want, you know?
Yeah.
No, I was shocked. No, of course, you got caller ID, so you didn't answer. But everyone else
I have standards, but they're low, so I'll talk to you.
Here you're forced to, so I get that, you know. But everyone else was very happy. And
I bet.
I was talking to a guy this week, and I said, hey, I see you at the industry events, film events. I never see you anywhere else. You know, I don't feel comfortable getting. I said, give me your number. I'll call you. We'll get a cup of coffee sometime. And I could see him light up. He was very happy. Why is it so hard for us to reach out?
I struggle with this enormously. I'm amazed that you do that once a year. I wish I did that once a year because it's something that I struggle with a lot.
And they would like it. Your friends would enjoy
I
it.
think you're right. I think it's just too easy to sort of get to the point where it's a little bit uncomfortable, and then the next day it's a little bit more, and the next day a little bit more, and it gets to the point where you end up never checking in.
Yeah. I called a friend of mine who's been sick. I won't mention his name. And I didn't get him. So I said, hey, bud, I'm just calling to make sure you're okay. Want to check on you. His wife called me back and said, you know, Pete, nobody calls him.
Yeah.
He was so happy to get that call, even though he was too sick to answer. Sometimes we can affect people much more than we know.
Yeah.
I really think that. When I get in a crowd, I get inhibitions. And I have to force myself to go over to someone and say, hey, Pete Christensen said, now, where do I know you from? I've seen you around, man. What's your name? That's very hard for me. Why? Why are we so afraid of possible public humiliation? Why is that so terrible? It won't kill you, you know.
Sticks with you though.
Well, you started with the idea of how many connections
Yeah.
are optimal for health. And it's very clear, very, very clear, really robust science, that having relationships is good for both your cognitive health and your longevity, which are two different things, but they're both really important. Like most things, though, there's going to be a sweet spot. That you need to have a number of good relationships is absolutely true, but that you need to have thousands of Facebook friends doesn't follow from that. Your relationships can get so dilute that they become meaningless.
Right.
So having a huge number of shallow relationships probably isn't any better than not having any relationships at all. It's probably another form of isolation. So what you want is a handful of good, close relationships, people you could call and say, I feel horrible today, can we just talk? Or, what do you need, pal? I can come over and help you, something like that. And I mean, think about the connections in your life. How many of them are like that? Lots of college students have told me, I know because I interview my students on this to try and stay in touch. They equate digital friendships with brick and mortar, in the same room friendships. That is not actually what research shows. Our brains function differently when we're physically present with someone, even than over Zoom or something. I think Zoom is better than nothing. And I think that, like, if I lost my mobility or something, I would way rather visit with you guys over Zoom than not visit at all. Mm-hmm. But it's given a choice, you want people you go to have dinner with. And going to have dinner with someone or something like that, inviting them over and cooking together or doing some activity together, is different than just being in the same room, in the sense that you're actually focused on each other. So I love the rule that some groups have, that whoever touches their phone first pays for dinner, right? I think that's a great going out with your friends rule. And I also prefer to be, this is a pretty good sized group for me. 3 or 4 people is about the most I can handle, and give them my full attention. But I will agree that I'm unusually bad at small talk. So it's not going to be the same for all of us. I'm not trying to make a one-size-fits-all answer, but just that there's a sweet spot. Look for it.
Well, can I ask you? I'm going to put you on the spot. You're part of a couple. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so do you have like 6 close friends or a dozen close friends for both of you?
I'm part of a rather odd couple, but I will say.
And it's none of my business.
No, not at
Her
all.
partner is a whale.
My partner.
Cut it out.
No, my partner's a human being, but it's more complicated than I'll get into here. We mostly have the same friends, but we also have a lot of friendships that don't overlap because
You'd separate lives, of course,
we're
to some extent.
Different people.
Now, here's the old test. Call someone up at 3 a.m. If they answer and go, oh, Pete, what's wrong? Okay, that's a friend. If they answer and the first thing is, do you know what time it is? Okay, that may not be a good friend. That's the old litmus paper test on that. Now, you were wanting to talk about deafness and dementia Is there a correlation there?
So as we talked about in a previous episode, exciting episode,
We touched on it, yeah.
our story
Yeah.
so far, there is a correlation between hearing loss, pretty strong correlation between hearing loss and cognitive decline.
So, hold on. I want you to clarify this. So, is cognitive decline for people who have had hearing loss all their life, or someone like me that's losing their hearing?
So that was where we left off last time.
Yeah.
Is it the same for somebody who grows up in a deaf community? And I did do my homework since that last one, and that's not something we could find an answer on. As far as I can tell, that hasn't been studied in quite that way. So I don't know whether... We did talk about the fact that a large swath of the deaf community does not consider it a disability, doesn't want it to be considered a
Yeah.
disability, and they just find it to be an alternative way of living. And it's not like they're not communicating. They have American Sign Language, which is really expressive.
Yeah.
A lot of my deaf friends have told me that they can tell a story more vividly in ASL than they can than I can speaking words. So I postulate that if you grow up deaf in a deaf community, it doesn't have the same cognitive impact. I think the problem with deafness is that it cuts us off from stimulation and relationships, not deafness per se. Now, there would still be some correlation because some kinds of neurologic disorders may include deafness. So if there's something neurologically wrong, there probably will be earlier cognitive decline, and there might be associated deafness. But in that case, it wouldn't be cause and effect, it would just be a correlation.
Okay, so to bring it down to the bottom floor where I'm living, if I'm going deaf, but I still keep up my social activities and my social interaction, that should help me not get dementia.
Correct. If you're losing your hearing, the most important thing to do, I would say, is get hearing aids and maintain your social life. But what we see a lot is people going, I don't need hearing aids. There's nothing wrong with my hearing. And you go, sorry. And they go, what?
I can always tell. Here's a fact that I found very interesting. When I was a disc jockey, when you put headphones on, you would yell to talk to someone. And then when I worked in a factory where we put earplugs in, you would think you're talking normally and you're whispering.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, you would, somebody be right there and you go, and they go, what the come on, you know. Now, you also wanted to talk about something I'm really in the dark on. And I don't want to spend the entire broadcast on health, but this is
Why not?
interesting. We're going to find out.
You got two healthcare people.
Electroconvulsive therapy. I don't even know what that is. It sounds like shock treatment.
It is shock treatment.
What the heck? I gotta go. Well, I thought that was proven ineffectual in the 60s.
No, it is never. It's been proven, I think, consistently to be very effective. It certainly has a lot of bad press, and I think you were mentioning that there was recently WHO recommendation.
Yeah, what made me think of it recently was that the World Health Organization, WHO, came out with a statement that ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, should not be used without consent. And I would agree with that. But the problem is not just the denotation. What they said was correct, and I absolutely endorse that. There actually might be some exceptions. We'll circle back to that in a second. But the implication in a lot of people's minds, the connotation, is that electroconvulsive therapy is routinely done without consent, and that it's a barbaric, torturous, abusive people.
Well,
And so I wanted to sort of clear the air about what it is, how it's done, and why it's still around. And this is something you know about as well, I believe.
so let me interject here. What is it used for?
It's used for a number of mental illnesses, certainly for depression that's intractable. Usually it's not used as a first-line treatment, although I've heard many mental health professionals say it would be their go-to for themselves if it came to that.
So
Now, you realize that one of the basic reasons so many people have grown up thinking is barbaric is because Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. They use
Oh,
electronics
nothing to do
on
with
them.
it. But
No, but,
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest
yeah,
did
another
kind
one.
of conflate it. Now, to be clear, in the movie, they never actually equated electroconvulsive therapy with prefrontal lobotomy, but they were juxtaposed to each other, and Jack Nicholson was rebelling against them both in such a way that they got conflated. So whether or not it was the intent of the movie to conflate them, that's what happened in a lot of people's minds. Prefrontal lobotomy is as barbaric and outdated and wrong as you could possibly imagine. But electroconvulsive therapy is still around and is actually a very valid form of therapy.
What besides depression is it used for?
Well, I only know it for refractory depression. Do you know of other indications for it?
I know it for refractory depression. You know, I would have to look into that in
Okay.
order to speak
So
to
I
that.
want
Do
to
you
explain.
know, and
Okay.
I know I'm throwing one at you out of left field, what is their success rate?
About 70 to 80%.
Really?
Mhm.
Wow.
So some people will get it and not benefit from it. Now, to put it in proportion, that's about similar to the numbers that are being reported for psychedelic therapies. And it's quite possible that some people would respond to one who did not respond to the other. So let me explain a little bit about what electroconvulsive therapy is and why it has a bad reputation and why we want to rethink that a little bit. In my early training, we were still doing it in this way. So I was actually participant in a handful of these. The patients came in, they wanted to be there. They weren't like handcuffed or anything.
Yeah.
But we strapped them onto the gurney with their consent, put a bite block in their mouth, and put a little current through their brain, and it induced a seizure. And they had an epileptic seizure and were biting on the bite block and everything else. And it was pretty horrible to look at. But I talked to the patients afterward. They didn't have any memory of any of that happening, and they felt better. Their depression felt better afterward. Nowadays, it's usually done with paralytics and anxiolytics, and so the patient still has a seizure. On an EEG, you can see their seizure. It won't work unless it triggers a seizure. But they no longer are thrashing, they're not biting on the bite block, they don't have blood in their mouth. It's not like it used to be in that regard. But it's largely cosmetic. It's not like they were suffering even then.
And when they come out of it, are they instantly cured of their depression? Or is
They
that-
instantly feel better. Yeah,
Really?
they come out of it feeling better.
In strong contrast to antidepressants, which
Take a long time.
it's
And also
taken quite a
addictive.
while.
This isn't something
So-
you have to do constantly. Now, as with psychedelics, and there are a lot of similarities between this and
should talk
psychedelics,
about that,
including
yes.
that they're controversial. But as with psychedelics, for some people, once a year, once every several years, or even once in a lifetime may be enough. For other people, this might have to be repeated at fairly regular intervals. The most frequent that I personally was aware of was about every 3 months, but I don't know what is the most frequent. So there are people for whom this has to be repeated. And you should be thinking, well, doesn't that burn out brain cells? No, the current is low enough that it causes them to fire, but it doesn't damage them. It doesn't damage the tissue of the neurons.
So I'm asking you, not fact, but an opinion. Well, if electronic shock can effectively, momentarily, cure depression, what does that tell us about it? About how the brain works?
What does that tell us about depression? That's such a good question, and that actually is part of the reason I would like to know more about whether or not it is effective for other conditions. Wow, that's a great question, and I would need to look into that more before I would venture an answer. Do you have an answer?
It's about 100 years old, and
Yeah.
it was initially designed for schizophrenia based on a theory which has been ruled out, a debunked theory. Well, I say debunked. I don't think it was an Italian scientist. I can't remember his name offhand. I don't think he was a quack or anything,
Yeah.
but he had a theory about schizophrenia. He thought low-level electric current, it was probably higher than we use now, would help with it, and he thought he got some really good results. None of that has held up to scrutiny over time, but in the process of trying to make it work for schizophrenia, people discovered that it worked for depression. Now, I had learned it differently initially. I was taught that people notice that folks who have depression and who have epilepsy, when they have an epileptic seizure, often their depression lifts for a while afterward. That is true, but that's not where this came from. It makes sense. It's a great story and it fits the facts, but it's not the truth. So why it works the way it does we still don't know why seizures seem to improve depression. But as it's used now, it's almost always a last resort. We try everything else first, and then we only do this if nothing else will work. But interestingly, a number of psychiatrists have written publicly that they would rather have this as a first-line treatment if they had depression, that they consider it actually the least harmful approach. So it's largely because of our ick factor. It looks horrible to watch if they're not paralyzed. And the concept of running a charge through your brain and triggering a seizure sounds pretty awful, even to me, and I'm defending it right now. So I get why we've held it back as a last resort, but a number of people who work with this stuff think it should be near first resort. So, and the other thing you were pointing out was that it's a lot of the same things we're saying here we could be saying about psychedelics and depression.
That was my next question. Okay, so recently, and correct me if I'm wrong, they made psychedelics available for research and for treatment. What would you treat with psychedelics?
So they've been available for a long time. What they did is they sort of potentially increased the funding, made it a little bit easier on the regulatory side to actually get it done. It's interesting to compare, success rates with psychedelics and ECT just because one we know a whole lot about. One has been around a really long time. And when that's the case with a treatment, you have a pretty good idea about what its actual success rate is. Mm-hmm. One is relatively new, not that it has not been tried in the past, but I don't think that we have enough information about its success rates to know if it'll be anywhere near as effective as ECT. When new treatments come out, you tend to see a much higher estimate of efficacy just because
for everything,
because you're doing small studies first, and small studies, if you see any effect, you see a large effect, or you're not going to report on them at all. So I wonder how efficacious it will. And I'm not trying to say it won't be efficacious, but I wonder what the final numbers will end up being.
Another big difference between them is that ECT was always done under super controlled conditions in research settings with highly trained people, ultra formal process. Psychedelics, almost the exact opposite. There have been there's really good science on psychedelics, but there's also a whole lot of advocates and fringe players and shamans, and you've got Timothy Leary. Now, I thought Timothy Leary kind of started all this and ruined all this. Actually, it was 10 or 20 years old by the time Timothy Leary hit. He just became the face of psychedelic therapy, and he was the wrong face for it. Yeah. By the way, before he got into LSD, Timothy Leary was brilliant scientist. It's not how we're going to remember him now. He jumped the shark pretty badly. Yeah. And he gave it a bad reputation, and for decades, much of this work was done in other countries or in fairly secret laboratories and stuff. I mean, they were legal, but they were not widely discussed in public and so forth. And now there's this renaissance of research into psychedelics for mental illness, again, primarily for depression, but not only. And it does seem to be effective for a large number of people, but the protocols are so varied. There's so many advocates on both sides, people who either just don't want to hear that there could be anything good about psychedelics, or people who are like, yeah, man, I totally knew this because once I did that peyote trip, I knew this was the way to save the world. Like, we have all these different players in the game, and so it's, I think, harder to sort the noise from the signal than it is with ECT.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of protocols recently for psychedelic-assisted talk therapy, where it starts with the administration of a psychedelic medication and then proceeds to relatively, typical talk therapy, and gets better results than either alone.
And Dr. Davis just said something super important, which is it's accompanied by talk therapy. What it does is it makes people more amenable to therapeutic discussions. But just sitting at home and taking LSD isn't self-medicating for depression. It needs to be done by somebody who knows what they're doing.
Of course, yeah.
And right now I don't know who that is. I mean, there are people in psychiatry who are trained for it, but there are also the shamans and alternative medicine people and ancient cultural traditions, and I really don't know how to sort among them right now, except to say that I don't think anybody right now is the sole proprietor of the best application. But it's not stay home, get high, you'll get over your depression. That's not what it boils down to.
Of course. Now, in our final couple of minutes here, previously we talked about probiotics, and you wanted to inform us on prebiotics. What are they?
Prebiotics are really anything that you eat or orally administer that sort of change the way organisms in your gut grow, that encourage the growth of certain microorganisms and maybe discourage others. So fiber is a prebiotic, and there are numerous others as well. And I believe there's some evidence that may be a little more efficacious than probiotics. Although, again, it's something that you kind of have to keep on taking. It's not something that you take one time and then have a permanent change in your microbiota.
Good source of fiber.
What is a good source of fiber?
I asked you first.
Oh, okay.
Nuts, bran,
Yeah.
psyllium husks,
Vegetables.
fruits and vegetables, usually. Potato skins. The skin on corn kernels is high fiber. Resistant starches, which we won't have time to go into today. We can do that on the next talk if there's interest. But resistant starches are a great way to turn foods that right now you feel guilty about, like baked potatoes and oatmeal and pasta, into a high fiber diet.
I told my friend I eat potatoes. I don't put the butter, the sour cream, the chives, the salt. I eat potatoes. And he said, you can't do that. If you want to not get a huge beer gut, you can't eat those starches. Is that right? I always like to end it on me. Go ahead.
Scrub the skins and eat the skins, or ideally grow your own, because certainly they can have a lot of the pesticides on them. But that's the main thing I would say there.
Potatoes are
thoughts?
mostly starch, which is to say they're mostly long chains of simple sugars.
That's
And so your
bad.
friend is right to that degree. But if you cook the potato and then cool it, what happens is those long chains of starches break up and then recombine into nets rather than strings. And those nets are harder to digest. That's what resistant starches refers to. And there's different classes within them, way too technical to go into here. But the bottom line is that if you heat and then cool a lot, not all starches, but a lot of them, you turn them into resistant starches, which become soluble in insoluble fibers. And then you've increased the fiber in your diet. But from your point of view, it still seems like mashed potatoes or oatmeal or whole wheat bread or pasta. But it does mean cold rather than hot. So there's that trade-off.
Meaning if you heat it up again.
If you heat it up again, you don't lose all of the benefit, but you lose some of the benefit. Okay. So I definitely encourage people to read up about resistant starches and look for versions of stuff that you can enjoy cold. A lot of people use pasta cold in salads, for example.
With that long and overly complicated answer, it totally confused me.
Did it?
Well, I have to say that we're out of time. You are? Your name?
I'm Annie Davis Cream.
And I'm Pete
Lovely
Christensen.
story. I'm Coffee Brown.
And remember, don't die dumb.